Hello and welcome to another episode of the PHA Podcast. My name is Stefan Gillum and I'm here to bring your voice in affordable housing. And on today's episode, I am so unbelievably, outrageously excited to invite onto the show our dear friend, Miss Sally Stang with the Wichita Housing Authority, correct?
Correct.
Yes. And Sally, you have been doing this not for a long time. I won't say you've been doing it for a long time, but you've been doing it extensively.
Yes.
Let's say extensively.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the affordable housing industry itself.
Sure. Just like most that we meet, it was never my intention to become a housing director.
Right.
You just kind of fall into it. It either captures your heart or it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I started my first position with the Lake County Housing Authority in Illinois. The Housing Authority was right next to the community college where I was going to school.
Okay.
And it was a job.
It's an easy transition.
It was a job. It was, I started as half-day receptionist and half-day data entry for the new voucher program. That tells you about how long it's been.
Okay.
And I always say that I grew up at Lake County Housing Authority. I sat in almost every seat at the organization, was there 19 years, and decided to take the leap and applied to the deputy director position in Tucson, Arizona.
Very awesome.
Yeah.
And so you went from Lake County to Tucson and then to Wichita.
Correct.
And so, but while you were in Tucson, you had like a really big housing stock, right?
Correct.
You had a ton of units on both sides doing a lot of things. What was it like to have to manage that many different units?
It was a lot. It absolutely was. And we were both the city and the county housing authority. In addition, the community development administrator for the area. I had 156 employees. I'll actually say that was the challenge. It was hard for me not to know every employee personally.
Oh, yeah.
And by name, and to be able to know about them and their families. And that was a real challenge for me.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I've talked to a lot of different housing authorities, a lot of EDs, a lot of commissioners, and one of the things they're saying is that the staffing that there is one of the problems that they're running into right now with their housing authorities. So when you were in that space with 156 people, what was it like to bring on and onboard and make sure you had the right people in the right seats? Like, what did that look like for you?
It was really challenging. With the Tucson Housing Authority, similar to what I have in Wichita, we're actually a department of local government. We are not the typical housing authority that it's its own entity. So we were also challenged by all of the requirements of the city. So a blessing and a curse, right? Had my own HR department that I, needed to hire people. Hey, HR, handle it.
Go get me somebody.
Yeah. Same thing with legal and law. I can remember at Lake County, we were, our own entity. And I'd be like, do I really want to call the attorney? It's like, he's going to bill me for every 6 minutes. And, when you're
for every third paper clip.
You got it. And, coming in under a city structure, that's one of the benefits is, there's a whole floor of attorneys. I just pick up the phone and say, hey, we have this issue. I don't have to worry how it's necessarily hitting my budget.
Okay.
So that was what it was, like I said, it was a blessing and a curse related to HR. Because there was a whole team of people to help us try and attract and onboard people. But it also meant we had to follow their rules all the time.
All the rules, all the time.
Yeah, yes.
Absolutely.
And it could be very challenging.
We do that anyway.
Oh,
we do that anyway.
Absolutely.
Right.
But I'm very much about people being fit, and that was everybody had to be asked the same question with the same tone and the same inflection in your voice, and it was like you really don't get to know somebody really well when you can't get specific about asking about their particular experience.
Right, their space and how they've engaged in this area before and what they really want to bring to the table and things like that.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so then you went from Tucson to Wichita. Tell us a little bit about that transition.
That was, I came to Wichita in July of 2019, and nothing goes as planned, right? I would have never predicted COVID-19.
You were right there. You're like, I got a new housing authority. We're going to do all this great stuff. Everything's about to be, you had all these ideas. Everything's about to be fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then COVID
hit you.
Yes. And we're like, okay. And again, blessing and a curse, right? Very, very challenging, but with that came resources.
Right.
And, it was like, okay, let's double your normal budget. Because all of a sudden we have emergency rent assistance to deploy and, CARES funding under CDBG and ESG and try and get that obligated in the next 4 months. It's like, okay, we can do that.
What was that process like for you? So many PHAs went through the ERA I don't want to call it. It was a rush.
It was.
Went through the ERA rush, right? And some PHAs are still trying to distribute some of that money. So what was it like for Wichita to go through that ERA rush and make sure everybody had what they needed?
We did really well. Simply, I think Congress actually made a mistake in having the money flow through Treasury
Yeah.
instead of HUD, because
Right.
housing authorities already had wait list systems,
Yeah.
staff trained in doing income certifications, connections with landlords.
Right.
And, by funneling the money through Treasury to local government, it was a challenge. But that's where my blessing and a curse comes into play.
Right.
We were a housing authority as part of the city, so we had a direct allocation
Oh,
of
okay.
ERA money. We were one of the first to be able to get our application out the door.
Yeah.
Every time there was an opportunity for reallocated funds,
in.
we were in. We
Yeah.
got them each time.
Nice.
And it was just an experience thing. We didn't have to go out and procure new software. We just kind
Right.
of tweaked what we had already in play. So we were really able to be nimble.
Very cool. Very cool. Now tell me a little bit about public housing.
Yes.
Right. So you've got some distinct, interesting aspects of your public housing program because you inherited some single family homes into your public housing program.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that and what that looks like and how you've maneuvered around that space.
It was a challenge. It was one of the things that was on the table when I first took the job. I knew we had a stalled RAD project. They were attempting to convert the entire portfolio under RAD.
Right.
We were successful in converting 4 multifamily properties, but the single family we brick wall after brick wall.
Yeah.
Couldn't get a HUD loan. Even HUD said, no, it's too expensive and difficult to manage and maintain
Right.
scattered site single family homes. It's like,
You're right, HUD. That's true.
That's absolutely true. We got an award of tax credits and we couldn't find an investor who was willing to take the jump.
Right.
We worked with HUD and consultants who said, you're probably best off doing Section 18 and dispose of those single family homes and reinvesting the proceeds into something else. So that's where we are right now. We have our first approval on our first grouping of homes under Section 18, and some are on the market today, and we're doing lots of open houses. There's tremendous interest. And we have a great new project that we're looking to invest those proceeds in the future.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so you got into that space. You had these single family scattered. How many did you have?
352 single family homes.
Whoa.
Most of them are 4, 5, and 6 bedroom.
I was waiting for you to say like 20.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got these single family properties. What did it look like when you had to go in and invest and rehabilitate and put back together and all that kind of stuff in this public housing space?
It's definitely a challenge. But once again, ARPA kind of to the rescue as we're putting out in our next 2 groupings of of Section 18 applications. We're actually going to marry up. We received $5 million in city ARPA funds that we will make available, and we're working with nonprofit and for-profit developers in purchasing those single family homes with some funding to help provide, some needs. Obviously, some repairs, and then we're going to have a requirement for either affordable homeownership or affordable rentals.
Yes.
With PBVs layered on if they want to do rentals. That way, we know they stay affordable and stay in good condition. And then we also have home funds that we're going to make available for down payment assistance on the ones that convert to home ownership. So we're really excited that it's a tremendous opportunity to try and get new homeowners.
Well, it looks like you all have diversified the way that you're taking, the approach that you're taking on this.
Correct.
And I think that's really awesome.
We've had to. It's been a challenge though, because it's like, you start down a path and you think you're heading in
and then
that
somebody
direction.
goes, nah, you can't go. Sorry. Can I see your badge, please? You're not allowed to come this way. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about Project Hope, right? So Project Hope has become a big thing for Wichita. And you guys have a $5.5 million investment in this. Tell me a little bit about how you decided it was time to really put some time and energy and money into Project Hope.
Well, Project Hope is actually a little different than the 5.5 million.
Okay, it's different than the 5.5.
So the 5.5 million is home ARP funds.
Okay, so that's the ARP funds you were just talking about.
No, different ones.
Okay.
Yeah, I love it. More money we can bring into the. So home ARP is home funds that came out of ARPA, but it was specifically you had to design programs that were going to assist people coming from homelessness, domestic violence, or for
Got you.
human trafficking. And we went through the process. We actually hired a consultant to come in and do a deep dive into the homelessness ecosystem in our community to really determine what are the needs and what are, how we could make the biggest impact with that
Right.
5.5 million. And so after 9 months of planning and outreach to stakeholders, we came back and realized we needed really what we're now referring to as the multi-agency center.
Okay.
And so we are putting
Say that
together
again. The multi-agency center.
We
Okay,
call it the
y'all
MAC.
listening? The multi-agency center.
Yes.
That's what we're going to be talking about now.
Yep.
Take your pens and pads out.
And so, when we first started down the path, we were really looking at it through the lens of home art because that
Right.
was the first source of funds. And with home art, you can't do congregate shelter. You can do non-congregate shelter, you can do housing, you can do supportive services, but not congregate shelter. But through our stakeholder engagement, we realized if we wanted to be really successful, we needed to build housing, we needed non-congregate shelter, we needed congregate shelter,
Right.
and we needed a space where a navigation center, where people who needed connection to services could find those services and get the warm handoff
Right.
to whatever other else needs they have. Rather than, here we made you an appointment and go down and, see this group a week from next Tuesday.
Yeah,
It's like,
right.
no, let's take you down the hall and get you connected with what you need.
Yeah.
And so now we put out an RFQ. We've selected a development partner. We're looking at, obviously low-income housing tax credits on
Right.
the housing units as well as those public housing net proceeds from the sale of those units.
Okay.
So we're looking at 150 to 180 units that we want to build. The congregate shelter, we're looking at new market tax credits, obviously low-income housing tax credits, home funds.
So
the
it
whole
sounds
nine
like
yards.
you all have been super innovative in how you go into HUD, into Treasury, and find the funding that you need to put together the programs that you're looking to do for your community. What is the process? What's the strategy that you've taken to make sure that you can go out and find the money to get stuff done?
Bringing the right partners to the table
Yeah.
and realizing that addressing homelessness in our community is a community effort.
Right.
And so we're talking with federally qualified healthcare centers to have them on site. We want it to be that one-stop shop. It's not, we're Wichita. It's not going to be as big as what they do in San Antonio, or in some other communities, but we need to devise something where it's really easy for people to connect to what it is that they need so that they can be successful.
Awesome. Okay.
Project Hope.
Project Hope. I got it all
Yep,
wrong. So
that's
you can
okay.
just tell me everything about what you guys did with Project Hope.
So this one, people go, huh, when I say
Right.
this. So the housing department actually applied to the Department of Justice for a grant. And this came about, we have an incredible homeless outreach team in our police department. And, they have a complete different focus on addressing homelessness. I asked Officer Nate just this week, I said, so how many people have you arrested or, given a citation in the last 5 years? He's like, 0. That's not our role.
Wow.
Our role is really connecting people to services and to housing.
Oh, that's such a different approach, though.
It is.
Such a different approach.
It's fabulous.
Yeah.
And we have a great relationship. And so in early 2020, I'd only been there 6-8 months.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with him and said, we had just implemented our limited referral-based homeless preference in our voucher program. And we weren't getting a lot of referrals from our partner agencies. And they're like, we just can't find, there's not enough people with capacity to do the casework. And so I was working with Officer Nate, and he said, I've seen this. Our lobbyist has told us about this Department of Justice grant that's kind of flexible.
Right. Okay.
And I was
flexible.
like, that's what I said.
I like flexible.
And at the time, it was called the Community-Based Crime Reduction Grant.
Okay.
And we did some analysis with the police department. That's one of the great things about being embedded. I just pick up the phone and be like, I need some analysis done here. And with this, at the time, it was called CBCR grant, you have to have a target area, and you really have to look at how do you address crime or calls for service in that area. And so we did some analysis, and it showed that our Broadway corridor area had 2 to 3 times the number of calls for service related to homelessness, and arrests related to homelessness. More arrests were happening for crimes that happened against people experiencing homelessness than by, which was very interesting.
That is very interesting.
And so, we came up with this hypothesis that if we could receive the grant and bring in more caseworkers, get more folks housed, then we would see a correlation in the reduction in the crime numbers at both the macro and the micro level. So we're
Right.
looking at the overall crime statistics for our 1.5 square mile area, but we're also taking it to that individual level. And so
Okay.
when we
Okay.
engage, we're looking at how many times that person had interactions with law enforcement in the 2 years leading up, and then during when they're receiving services. And I'll be honest, when we started writing the grant, I was a little narrow-minded myself. And I'm like, okay, with the funding, we could hire 3 caseworkers. And we're going to have an education campaign, and we're going to, do some connections with workforce, because
Right.
that's important. And part of the grant required, it's a community based, so we did a lot of engagement ahead of time, and we realized we could do this better.
Right.
And so rather than just hiring 3 caseworkers, we've actually created what we're calling care coordination teams.
Okay.
And each of those teams has a caseworker, as well as we've partnered with Newman University and Wichita State University, and we have a social work intern student, so a master's level student in social work, and then peer support specialists. So we're partnering with Breakthrough, who do training of people who've come from homelessness, and they are an integral part of that team and being
Right.
able to connect with people in the community. We still have connections with other resources, and it's just been growing. We have connections with Health Corps to provide medical services. We have connections with Workforce Alliance and Goodwill, who are doing job training and job placement.
Very nice.
We have every time I turn around, there's more and more groups. And we've
Right.
started monthly what we're calling neighbor resource fairs, and they're held at different areas within our target area. And all of these different providers are coming on site, and it's an opportunity to connect with
Wow.
people in need
Wow.
and try and connect them to whatever it is. Goodwill brings out their mobile van, which is it's a computer lab on wheels. And so like our housing team can find someone and get them in there, get them signed up for housing in the mobile van, get them connected to whatever other resources
Right.
at different places in the community.
Wow.
So
Wow, that's awesome.
It is really awesome.
I love how you all have been innovative and forerunning in just about everything that you've decided to do there in Wichita. So that leads me to my next question, which is like, what's next? Like, what haven't you done that you're going to try to do next?
Well, trying to pull off the MAC, that one's, we've applied for state home art funding. We need to make sure all the funding pieces come together.
Right.
At minimum, we know we're going to end up with housing units and at least some navigation space. It is really about bringing in all of the other players and truly collaborating, getting people to operate a little differently than they are
Right.
used to. That's a challenge. It really is to challenge agencies that have been doing, activities in this space for a long time to say,
Right.
try and
Shift
picture
it this way
yeah,
a little bit. Look at it from that angle for a little while. Yeah.
right. How can we leverage those things?
Yeah.
So then, we've had these care teams only in place for, since the beginning of the year. We've already applied for a continuum of care grant.
Okay.
So that once the DOJ funding, drops off, that we have a means to keep
Right.
funding the care teams, because we're finding that structure is so much more impactful than just trying to tie a caseworker
Word to the person.
to the person, because they're expected to know everything, to do
The hardest
everything,
part
and
of
to be
having
available.
the caseworker system is that they have to know all of the ins and out of all of the things and all of the scenarios and all of the complexities and all of the parts and all of the options, and then they have to interact in that space with this person's actual life
And be available 24/7.
right.
Right.
And whatever's going on in their life, whenever it's going on, however it's going on.
Yes.
That's the hard part. So it's really cool that you guys have put that team together and been able to approach it from a couple different angles.
And we're invigorating the community. So we, through Project Hope, we had different agencies doing outreach. Well, we found out in looking at the data, we're like, you're outreaching the same people. Why not?
Right.
So now they go out en masse.
Nice.
And they target areas, and they kind of just sweep through and try and connect
Oh,
people
that's
to
awesome.
resources.
Yeah.
And where they weren't working together before are working together.
That is fantastic. Okay, so now we get to the place I ask everybody this question.
Okay.
This is the standard, we're wrapping up the podcast question, right? So I give you a megaphone. It is a rainbow colored unicorn megaphone. It's magical, super magical. What's magical about it is as soon as you pull the trigger on it, whatever anybody is doing, they stop immediately and they start listening to you and they pay attention to whatever it is that you're going to say. What is it that you say when you pull the trigger on that megaphone?
Oh boy, that's really
Yeah, you got
that
the
is a
whole
tough
world's
thing.
attention.
The whole
They're
world's
all
attention.
stopped listening, and they're going to receive everything you say.
Wow. One of the, I think it is really about stretching and growing, and that we all need to come together. And if we just take that chance, come together, work together for the common good, we can do anything we want to do, no
love
matter
it.
what the goal is.
Yeah.
If we get out of our own way and understand that we are more creative, we're more impactful when we do things together, and be okay with that and embrace that.
Yes.
No matter what it is you want to get done, you can get it done.
I love it. I love it. Sally, thank you so much for joining us today. Sally Stang from the Wichita Housing Authority, doing amazing things throughout her community, and now being able to bring all of that to you all. And you guys hit Sally up. Ask her for advice. How did she do it? Where did she do it? Who did she do it with? Her time, I'm sure, is limited because she's got a lot of stuff going on, but I'm sure she'll be willing to chat with you there. And of course, check us out on the PHA Podcast everywhere: YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And always, the PHA Podcast is brought to you by AMA Consulting Group. My name is Stefan Gillum, and I'll see you next time.